In this video help tutorial, we're going to be working with these two screens. These are popover screens for inventory and the inventory portal. First of all, let's talk about a little bit about the inventory itself. In the organizational process of adding information, you have to understand some of the things have to be added prior to other ones. Now, all the blue section up in here is done actually before you start working down in specifications and so forth as you move down. But these, where you're doing drawings, specifications, you're also leading this thing down into creating an inventory. And then for the inventory, you have to purchase items. These are dependent upon each other. In order to do purchases, you first of all have to have inventory items. Once you have inventory items, then you can stock them into your inventory by purchasing stock, or when this application is delivered, you can take the inventory and add the inventory of your existing items and then set it up so that when you're doing your project purchases that you would have this information already in your inventory system, and you have it set up so you know your high and low levels and all that kind of stuff. And then you'd be ready to purchase items and continue. You need to put all your vendors in, your suppliers. So you need to have suppliers and inventory first before you start doing purchasing. So that's important to understand, that you have to have some items before you have other ones. Now, let's go back up to specifications for a second. Specifications work very well because you're building the idea of all the items that are going to be taken in order to build something. All the end item assemblies, sub-assemblies, and so forth, all the way down through the parts and pieces and stuff like that when you're designing. Now, you got to understand that when you do a project, that all of this stuff here and everything through here is shared with that ID number. So when I start to put in an inventory in, and this is very important, when I put a project inventory and I bring the screen up, every item that I add in here is actually owned by that project. What does that mean? Well, if I'm building an inventory and I have parts and pieces that go into that drawing package, which is part of the drawing package that we're creating over here, you can locate everything in that drawing package by looking in the part inventory, which is for this particular project, and those items would be used in the drawings so that the drawings would be ID'd by the project and the project inventory items. So if I went to another project, and let's do that, we're going to go up to the marketing listing, and I'm going to go to 2. I'm going to come back down here, and now I'm in item 2 for P2000, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to go over now and I'm going to look at the inventory. And now you see that everything that's being put in here that's created in this project, and the drawing package and specifications that are added to that all have the number 2 belonging to them. And all the stuff that we did in the pre-proposal, proposal, and the bids and the manning and all that kind of stuff all belong to project ID number 2. But the project number for that particular project is always going to be the same one that is the proposal number up here. So as I work my way down through inventory items and stuff like that, they're going to all be owned by that particular project with that ID number. Now, to go along with that, you have to understand that if you do things like quality assurance, and you have those down here, and then invoices and stuff like that down here, they're really directed at whatever project you're in, and the ID for that particular thing will be used in here to build work orders and invoices and show materials and labor and all that kind of stuff. Okay, all that being said, I'm going to move back to the other side of the house and go back to project number 1, because I've set up the information in the project inventory to display information for you. So I'm going to click on the popover and bring it up. What you would do is you would create the inventory. In each portal record, you're actually putting in a header. What a header is what's at the top of your invoice or a purchase order or whatever. You'd have a header with certain information in it. In this particular case, we're adding a new inventory data item here. And what we're doing is we're putting a vendor list in there, so we had information for adding the vendors that who you want to use in this product. Now, this is like a pick list. These are people that you think would be where you would purchase the items, or they would be vendors that do outside services or fabricate things for you as a vendor. Or it could be vendors that are producing an item and you just buying that in a buy type of a situation instead of a make type of a situation. The information for this particular portal is that you have a product part number, the name of that part, and this portion all down here, with the exception of most of this, is all calculated for you. In the case of a dash ahead of this means that we have no more inventory. We're zero. In fact, there's a demand against it where we actually have a work order that has a demand for that particular part, whatever it is. Now, I'm using this as test data just so I can show you what it looks like when you have that. What you would do is if you actually use something, the quantity of used would be in here, and that would indicate that if this was now +1 or -1 or 12 on hand, or you have some on order, on a purchase order, this is going to show you that you have a demand to purchase stuff and you have no inventory currently available. So what you would do is you'd have an out of stock situation. And if you bought some more, then you would have the quantity used would be everything that was used up to this point in time is an accumulation. And then these would have a number of them on hand, and hopefully a positive number if you use them that much. And then a on hand is the items that you have physically on your shelf. These are on order, these are on the shelf. Now down here at the bottom, you have a standard price. Now this is something you have to enter when you're putting these in here. So what you would be doing is checking with the vendor and getting maybe multiple vendors to give you what you would consider the standard sell price. Then you would have what you're paying for it from the vendor. And then you would have an average cost. This will average the cost. So when you go to a vendor, you have a history for each time that you've purchased this item. It will average all the items in here. And the vendor may still be at that cost, but he may be up or down depending on what kind of business you have. It could be drifting up and drifting down as market demand puts on the product. As that occurs, just exactly what I said there would be what is called an inventory trend notes. Trends are comments about the sales and service life issues. Service life issues would be based on things like the MTBF, mean time before failure. A lot of parts and items that you pick up, especially in the government, have an MTBF actually installed on the ID plate where you have your serial number and the part number. And the MTBF tells you that this thing will last X amount of time. And if it's an item that is repairable, that's important. Let's go over here and look. If it's a repairable item, if it's a no repairable or not repairable, if it's a consumable, salvage, or a core, those are what are picked here as far as repairability. What does that have to do with the part? If you're buying a part, you need to understand if it has an MTBF assigned to it, and you can calculate how many hours are going to accumulate over a certain period of time. That will tell you the life expectancy or serviceability of this item. So that kind of tells you what you would do as far as how long this thing would last. So you can perceive that out in the future when 12,000 hours are accumulated, for example, if you did 100 hours on this a month and you're using something, or it moves up and down between a certain area, you can put trends in there as far as how long this thing is actually being used, and then you can calculate when this thing may die. For example, this is called a floodlight set, and basically what I'm just putting something in there so we have numbers and names. But if it were something like an engine, it had a 12,000 hour life expectancy, and you used it for, say, 150 hours a month, which is nearly the total at which you'd probably expect it to be used. Or if it's something like a diesel truck that hauls food across the country and you have a fleet of those, this becomes very important for scheduling your scheduled maintenance. There's unscheduled and scheduled maintenance that needs to be done, and you have to forecast that. Okay, with that being said, let's take a look at our little drop-down list here, and you'll see inventory statuses, and you can edit this like we do before. You can come in and edit this to fit your exact needs. But this is all about the life expectancy and what happens during that life expectancy and what may happen when it finally gets obsolete, or it's a consumable item that eventually it'll be used and it'll go away. These are all important things to understand your inventory and how it's going to go as far as how do you collect information and use that in trend analysis. Then there's vendor notes. This is comments about the vendor supplier and issues that you may have with the vendor or lead time issues. You put your information in here and you use it to scroll, and you can have as much data in there as you need by the part. So it becomes very, with trend analysis, it becomes very important to accumulate information about the vendor, about things like we're talking about here. And this would be for every record. Now, obviously, this is a scrollable record, so as many as I have in there for inventory items, they would be identified and they would be put in part number order. And then you can go back and you could use the portal in order to manage that information. Now remember I said this is a header? Let's go look at the portal and see what happens. When I go to the portal, I'm actually not on the main page anymore in the marketing area. where we have all the buttons down the side of our page. What we're in is another area where we brought the information over from the header file that we created on the marketing page, and now we can use additional information here to work through the information that we're working on. Now the things like the MTBF and the we still have an inventory. Now we're talking about inventory per se, period. For example, the part that was in that record we were looking at, when you come over here, it opens up that record. It tells you about it. And now in this case, it flags a low quantity or an order that's out there that hasn't satisfied what it's supposed to do. This is an automatic thing. If you get an inventory that is in a plus situation, then this red will go away. But this flags both here and on the list view to let you know that this thing is at a low stock or under. There is nothing left. But going back and looking at your trend notes, you might only use this twice a year. So you just may want to order it and then look at the lead time information that you put in this down here so that you understand that if you order this thing, it might take 30, 60, 90 days to get it. So if you're planning scheduled maintenance based on the MTBF, you can order it ahead of time so that it'll be on the shelf when you need it. So you're going to replace a part maybe that has high time on it, or you have enough items in stock that when you do reach high time items, like maybe a fuel pump on a diesel engine, it only has a given life on it. And if you recognize that some of your items in inventory are getting to high time based on the MTBF, then you want to put notes in there that come across from the header record. Okay, now all the information in here came across from the header record that we used there. Down here in the material portal, this is a very interesting thing how it works. Basically what happens is when you put material on a work order invoice and you use it, this will become live and it'll all put all the data in here and count each item for this particular part number that has been utilized and used. The same thing happens when you're purchasing items. It's going to show you how many you've purchased for this item, when it was purchased, and it'll also tell you what work order it was put on, work order invoice. So you can do your trend analysis in this screen saying, okay, this year I've used 2, last year I used 1, and I can forecast next year 1's probably going to be enough. But if it's the opposite of that, and you got 25 of these a year or 100 or whatever, this tells you how frequently you should be ordering and how many you should be ordering for your high and low requirements based on the information that's collected in this portal. Now another thing is that you're in here, you can take a look over here on the side, and what it does is it shows you the part number that you're looking at and its standard price. This is the price you would sell it at for standard price. The actual cost was $790, and in this particular case, if I'm looking over here for the part number 11213, and I look over here, well, we're selling it for $1,300 over the $790. It's quite a markup on that. Now, if I wanted to see the next record, I could click on any field in this area, and now you're going to be viewing that record. So you can move through the different records and see exactly what's going to be used and what you want to use it for as far as the data, and you can work your data in here to move through and update your trends, your vendor comments, and your vendor list. Obviously, sometimes vendors become not usable for one reason or another. Either they're raising your prices too quick, so you can just edit them out and not have them in there. You will see when you're going in the purchase area, when you're purchasing items, that you will be looking at this list in here to see what vendor is going to be the one you want to call and see if they have a good price on items. And then you also have the situation where you have vendors that you've previewed as far as your contract is concerned, as far as building and making items. If they're going to build something for you, you can have that item in here, and it may be one-time build depending on your contract and what you're building, or it be a multiple contract thing that lasts for a lot of years if you're doing all the servicing and everything for that. And that's why we have an invoice and a work order in the same, where you can do a work order and fix something or service it for a client, and also have the ability to buy it. And under the contract, you could have your contract. Say you built something, you would be the servicer for it, so you need an invoice and a work order together in one place. Do the work order as scheduled maintenance, do the invoicing for invoicing the client and so forth for the items that you're doing on scheduled maintenance. And if you have unscheduled maintenance where you're doing servicing and so forth, you would also put your service items in your inventory. For example, you can also put services like labor and other things in your inventory and use that record to track the labor hours and labor items down to the part number that you're doing. So for example, labor's labor, but if you had a part number that was consumed during that, it keep track of all the materials that you used in this area within the inventory. So there's a lot of data that is managed in here. Now in this particular case, once I receive the item here, like I says, part quantity, purchase price, and so forth, in the purchase order, when I show it as received, what's going to happen, it's going to say the quantity amount used will now be something that is live. It'll come in, it'll put a 1 here for if I use 1, and it keeps a count of every time I use it. So you don't have to calculate this stuff up here. It'll be done for you. Same thing if some for materials used, it would take the price of what you sold it for, or in this particular case, this is, yeah, the sell price was just price. You would use here, it's quantified over here within the record by the count amount, and then drops down and summarizes all the time, all the parts that you use for that particular part number, and gives you the gross sales that you had on that item. In this case, it's actually a purchased item in the record as far as the parts, but you'd see the used and the capital that was actually brought in based on the service part that you put on a work order invoice. Here is the work order invoice that was put on, so you can actually go to that record for that portal record for that particular thing, and you will be able to find that record and where it was used and what client was using it and so forth. The material listing, this is a list of all the materials that, in fact, let's go look at that, that all the materials that are accumulated within the records would be brought into here. Now this is for all records and all projects, because there would be parts that would span across. If you had multiple contracts for the same exact part, each time a new part is added in this particular case, if you have that for this item ID, it might pop up 1 or 2 in 2 different contracts, or 3, or maybe a dozen. So you can go in here and you can actually look at what the work order is, where this was used, what contract it was on, what project was it on, and you can do a search using your do action. Go over, do a search, and say maybe I want to look by the project and part number, or I want to look by the project only, and then maybe I want to do all projects. I'd leave that blank, and what I would do is I'd put every time a part number was in there. And then if I wanted to see, say for example, I wanted to see all the work orders where this thing was used, it would show me all the work orders where this thing was actually used. So there's a lot of information supplied within the inventory system. This is the work order materials portal list view. So the work order is where this information is coming from, and we'll be working on that very shortly. So let's go back over here. We're going to go back into the main screen. We've looked at the inventory record. Let's go look at the inventory portal. Now, what this says up here, it says edit only project purchases. Basically what happens on this record, it's not something you come in to add records. It will add data from the project inventory portal. And as you use items, they'll show up over here. Now, if they don't show up over here, you can still add them here if you wanted to, but don't add them in any other record if it hasn't been created before now. This is a portal record. So what that means, if you want to go to the portal to see the individual record, you can. Now you can see here I actually dropped a little picture in there as an example. And I'm going to go to that portal record just to show you. In this area here, it shows the work order number. You would put it in there as far as the work order this was used on when you create the work order. In this case, it's never been created, so it can't put anything in there, meaning that this actually has not been used yet. Where if there's a work order or a part inventory item, you can see where it was used, and if you click on the record over here, it'll bring up that record for that particular item. You'll see it change slightly, and if you need to, you can type in the work order item, or it'll actually be supplied as you create the work order and take that particular part item. It will put that in here as a record, and every time one of these is used, it'll put the work record in there. It'll have the date it was used, the quantity that was used, and the item cost, and of course the work order number. And let's go ahead, and you also can delete a record for whatever reason. Say for example there's an error and you need to delete a record, you can delete it from here. Inventory portal list view. There's a list view for this inventory portal, and you'll see that this is the one we just left a little while ago for the materials. So there's other ways to get to this to see that information. In this particular case, if you had to go in and you say, I wanted to know what work order this was used on, if the portal record hasn't updated, and there will be some of these situations on the test bed that I'm working on because I haven't filled all the data in yet. For example, I have no purchase order records right now, and I have no work order invoices done yet. So this will be kind of waiting for information to be added to have this record or these records updated. Now we'll be getting back over here, so I'm not going to go here yet to explain that. Okay, so what we've looked at is we looked at the project inventory record. where we create the header and add our information, and then shift over to the portal record to finish adding any items that we need to put in there. You could add the narrative here or there, it's up to you. And then these items would be carried only in this area on the main header, and basically it gives you the inventory status, MTBF, and repairability. If you need to go back and forth, it's very simple. All you have to do is click on the record that you want to view. In this case, if I wanted to go to the portal record, I can go there. If I wanted to go to the purchase record, all the items within this yellow gold over here are all related, and then they're also related to QA, but that's a separate system. Basically, as items come in from a vendor, or you're building items and you're sending them out, you need to make sure that you inspect all this. And this is going to be the next place that we're going to be looking after we touch base on purchasing and the vendors. Okay, for this particular video, if you have questions or you see something you don't understand, you can either repeat the videos or contact us through our support site at ontargetsolutions.biz. And make sure you use the http:// if you're putting it into the browser up in the URL bar at the top of the screen. Okay, the next place we're going to be going is down to purchasing and then suppliers and on down the line. And we're getting close to the end of the project, minus what we're going to show over here, which are all these special reports. Before I leave this, these reports are either printable, things like invoices and work orders and stuff, and we've covered this, but I want to recap on this. We've already looked at, we did things with the specifications and the project drawings and the inventory. Now, as you go down through this, there's going to be a related report or something over here that relates to this last section of items down here. So we'll be going through reports, and I'm only touching base now to say, you're probably thinking, well, if this is inventory, where's the report? Well, there are inventory and other items in here. For example, there's the inventory report that you can find information that is broken down in such a way that you don't have to use a list view or a portal record to get the information you're looking for. You can run that inventory report, for example, or the purchase order report, or the drawing report, and so forth. And I'll be covering more in these reports that makes a lot more sense of how we use the information that we created over here or at the top of our screen over here, like the proposal budget and those kind of things. Okay, if you have any questions, contact us if you need support. Thank you.